Welcome to a course that will make you a better attacking player. Otherwise, I haven't done my job properly, and you can complain to me. I will buy you beer when I see you, if I see you in the future. Now, just to talk about this fantastic book that this video course and Chessable course is based on, The Art of the Attack by Vladimir Vukovic. It's really one of the, I would say, Bibles of attacking chess play in the whole of chess literature. If anything, this is the best attacking book that's ever been written on chess. And I think if you asked a panel of experts what book is the book to get if you want to become a better attacking player, they would pick this book. And it has beautiful examples in its pages, which I'm going to try to communicate to you in videos. Wish me luck, boys and girls. It's a mammoth project I've got ahead of me. I think I really have stepped down a rabbit hole here, but I love attacking chess, and this book has made me, in some respects, the player I am. I've studied this book numerous times and learnt a lot from it, and I want to share that knowledge with you in, again, a mammoth video course, but you're still going to learn it quicker than I learnt it by this video. So my idea is to get the main principles across to you with these videos. Yes, you have the book, and the book will show you it, but I'm going to try to communicate those ideas in the book in a clearest way as I can. And I know you'll become a better attacking player. Now, one thing, I note in a lot of players that I speak to that love chess, no matter what their strength, is they want to attack. They want to become attacking players. They prefer that play over positional games. I do. I always have done. At the end of the day, checkmate ends the game. Let's not mess about. Let's get to the king. Boom, boom, boom. Thank you very much. Way. So this is certainly what this is going to look at. But what this book does is give you the proper foundations and the proper way to attack. You cannot attack in every game in a wild way and expect to get good results. It just does not work. Believe me, I have tried. And you have to attack from a foundation, like that story in the Bible where the person builds his house on sand and it collapses. No foundation. You've got to have a good foundation. And what that really means is you've got to know the principles of attack, when to attack, and you've got to, build up a position to attack from. For example, a good center, good pieces, a weakening in your opponent's position. So you can't just do it out of thin air. It does mean a build-up is needed, and I'm going to show you how to do that. Now, the author goes on to talk about the history of chess in some respects, and attacking chess, as this book is all about that. Again, if you want to be an attacking player, if you had enough of this positional rubbish, this is the course for you. Of course, we do have to have positional foundations, but it teaches you to do that in a proper way. But let's just talk a little bit about the evolution of attacking chess to when this book was brought out. Bearing in mind, this kind of goes up to the days of Alekhine, Capablanca, that kind of era as the latest players. During the videos, I have brought in updates that I've thought of players like Topalov, Kasparov, Fischer. So I've brought in moments which the author obviously didn't know about when writing the book. It is an old book, but that doesn't, it is brilliant. It is the foundation. So he basically talks about the great chess reform in, can you believe what year? Do you know what year? 1485. And that's when apparently the modern variation of chess was made. Meaning before that, you couldn't castle. There was other rules. And when castling came into effect, new ways of attack came into effect. He then goes on to say that the main sort of people who developed the game, he doesn't really mention everyone I would have, but he goes with Philidor's mastery of positional ideas, he said was very important. Steinitz's ideas of attack, he mentions Morphy, but Morphy was one of the first people, and Morphy's attacking play was really quite rugged. As beautiful as it was, his opponents did not defend well. And Lasker after Morphy brought in better defensive methods, which makes Morphy's play a bit blunt and not applicable. It wasn't able to play in like the Morphy King's Gambit style. Lasker defended very well. And then he really says the real change in chess was when Capablanca and mainly Alekhine came along. And we're going to see throughout this course many examples of all these players and what they brought to chess. Alekhine showing that attacks should be built up in this way of sensible and logical, foundations. So center and the things I've mentioned, other many things which we'll come on to. I'm not going to tell you the whole bloody course now. There's a lot of videos to get through to get to that. So he really is a fan of Alekhine, and I think you will be by the end of this course. And a couple of things I'd like to add. I mean, it is a massive video course. I don't know how many of you are going to finish it all. I recommend you jump to chapters you think you might be weak on. And I do recommend that I'm going to give you many options to pause during the course of it, and you try to solve the positions on the board without just letting me talk the whole time. So use the pause button, because then you're going to have, opportunities to work things out for yourself. It's one thing me telling you the knowledge, but you're not really going to learn that knowledge unless you apply it. So even by applying the pause button, you're improving your chances to become a better player. That's quite a modern thing. Pausing makes you a better chess player. That's a nice new concept. Now, it's been a massive undertaking for me. It really, really has. I've enjoyed it a lot. I've learned a lot rereading this book, restudying it in depth. And now it's time for me to pass that knowledge over to you and make you a better chess player. Thank you to Chessable for giving me this opportunity. They've done a great deal of work. Thank you for Everyman for giving them the rights. And I just hope you enjoy it as much as I have done. And good luck. You're going to be seeing a lot of my face and voice soon. I apologize in some ways for that, but that was your undertaking. If you get too much of me, I don't want the threatening letters. Just use the pause button and go and have a little break. That's what I recommend. Let's move on to some basic examples of some other things that this book's going to undertake before we get to the proper chapters in this introductory section. First thing that the author Vladimir Vukovich mentions in the book is various kinds of attack. And to talk about that in a little bit more sense, it's not just direct attacks we're going to look at, direct attacks which threaten checkmate in one move, that do this, do that. Attacks are much more complex and subtle than that. Sometimes you might do an attack to get an advantage in the ending by forcing an exchange of pieces. Various examples. And there are such things as indirect attacks, where you combine attacks against your enemy, the enemy king, with other areas of the board. And these are much more common. So this is really the technique of attacking the king, but having the possibility of something else, or the possibility of combining an attack against something else with the king. As this next example is a basic sort of point of that idea. White plays d4, and this obviously does not represent a direct attack on the opposing king in this position, but it has a bit of venom if black is oblivious to your idea and plays bishop to b7. We simply take on c5, and if he takes here, we now see this idea of an indirect attack. So d4 was not an overly aggressive move, but its intentions behind it were aggressive, and the intentions were queen d4, threatening checkmate, threatening the win of the piece. And this is an indirect way using the attacking idea to win the game, win material, winning a piece in this sense. So there are various kinds of attacks, again, in this course, and the indirect and direct attacks are just a small part of what you've got in store for you. The next example of how an attack can be beneficial is the consequence of doing a direct attack. In the last one, it was kind of indirect, but doing a direct attack against the enemy king, but in the sense that your opponent's only way to defend against your direct attack is to somehow weaken his position. So it could be by losing material. It could be by even weakening a single square that you can then change your plans to occupying and then building another positional plan even on. For example, this position here demonstrates it. It's white to play, and white starts a direct attack against h7 with knight g5. We'll be seeing this pattern of knight and queen and many other patterns throughout the course of this video course, even course video course. And here black has kind of three ways to stop queen takes h7. So let's just have a look at each of these moves and see how knight g5 has improved white's position. Well, first of all, if he plays knight to f8, which is generally a very good defensive square for the knight, white will now play positionally with knight to e4 and knight to c5. The knight can't come back to d7 because of knight to d6, and this attack, direct attack, has actually transferred to positional play. So don't always think that your attacking play is going to deliver checkmate. I wish it did, but sometimes you're going to have to be content with changing your plans to grinding out an ending. But in this position, with the knight coming to c5, white is clearly better, with black's bishop being a very bad piece, and play against the queen side, even with opening up another front. What about the knight coming to f6 in this position? Well, here black may be trying to play this move. So how has this helped us? Well, Vladimir Vukovic gives the plan of transferring our bishop to e5, and now we've moved the knight away from that square, so it's going to be a good plan. One thing I've really had a challenge with throughout this course is there's so many different interpretations. You had the original book, which didn't have computer analysis. You then had an edition included by Everyman, where John Nunn had analysis. But then you had the extra analysis with this edition by the Chessball team. And the Chessball team have put so much work into everything and finding all the modern lines, improving on John Nunn. And this is one such case. And I hope during the course of the videos, I will show you the improvements on the original text analysis. And here, bishop f4 allows the move c5. This is not mentioned by the original author, but we don't, when attacking, want to allow our opponent unneeded counterplay. This is something that Alekhine, as we mentioned in the introduction, was a master at doing. The modern way of attacking, if you can, even if it takes you a longer amount of time to do it, is to stop your opponent's counterplay. Stop this move. So the Chessball team have, again here, given us the idea that instead of bishop f4, a much stronger move is first to play b4, killing our opponent's bishop. We can still go with the bishop maneuver, but let's do it in a much better way here. And again, positionally, we can see knight g5, a direct attack, has still helped us, but we want to stop that counterplay. The last move black can play here is g6. But now, after the maneuver of our knight to e4, we can see yet again, this direct attack has improved the position of our knight. We have gained a tempo with d6, and we've also, got a nice hold generally on the dart squares here. This combined with our dart square bishop has improved our chances at winning the game in general. So all these things, please bear in mind, a direct attack is good only if it benefits your position and forces your opponent either to give up material or to concede something. A lot of weaker players try to do direct attacks, but in a way that it weakens their own position. I really want to warn you against that. I mean, let's think of Scholar's Mate. When on move 2, the queen comes out to h5. That's an example of an artificial attack. Only start an attack if it's going to do something contrary or weakens your opponent's position or helps your own position. Don't do an attack in the hope that your opponent will miss something. Never play like that if it weakens your position. That is just bad beginner's way of playing. Don't play tricky chess. You won't become a better player. It's got to be built on foundations. This course will tell you those foundations. The ultimate aim, of course, of chess and of attacking play is checkmate. Now, in the last video, we saw that's not always what an attack will lead to or should be used for, but checkmate ends the game, and you've got to try to arrange a basic pattern of checkmate around your opponent's king. Various strategies at doing this, building up to this, will be looked at. But we've got to bear in mind some positions and some basic thoughts which the author speaks about, where it's going to be easier to do that. Now, this is quite a confusing position. We are actually white going up the board, black is going down the board here. And some things to bear in mind is that the opponent's king in the middle of the board, obviously when there's a lot of pieces around, can be very dangerous. But it does have, with no pieces involved, 9 squares, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8 squares it can escape to. When it's on the side of the board, it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 squares it can escape to. In the corner, only 3. So a lot of the checkmate positions you're going to look at is against the castle king, and it's going to really evolve around those squares near to the enemy's king. And you've got to sort of work out which are the important squares and which squares you're aiming to attack on in general. And you've got to do this with your pieces. You might do it by your opponent using some of his own pieces. In this case, his own pieces block those escape squares, but mainly it will be your pieces which control the escape squares of your opponent's king. Now, this is a case in point. White has 3 pieces attacking. Normally 3 pieces is the magic number to checkmate. I want to say that, depending how many defenders your opponent has, which kind of works against your attackers. So if you have 5 pieces attacking, he has 6 defending, well, that's not really going to work. But if you have 3 pieces attacking, he doesn't have any defenders, it's likely to be mate. Whatever black plays in this position will lead to checkmate. And let's just have a look at 4 different options. If he takes the bishop there, getting rid of one of the attackers, then we can play bishop g7 checkmate coming up with queen takes d4. And these are different kind of checkmate patterns. So there's lots of terminology in the book which confuse me a little bit. I don't think it's so important, the terminology. It's the ideas behind it. And certain setups that you see will come back to you. And it's remembering those patterns so you can spot them quicker in your own games, which will make you that better player. So that's one sort of pattern demonstrated in this example. What about the king tries to run? Well, in this situation, we have a second pattern, bishop g7. Now, again, this is a combination of a different sort of setup of pieces. The author talks about pure mates and impure mates. Pure mates when there's not really any other pieces involved. And again, I think the terminology can be a little bit confusing. But this one, you are involving numerous amounts of your own pieces here. Every white piece is involved in this checkmate position. And let's have a look at maybe knight h5, trying to stop those ones. Well, again, you can try to work out the checkmates, but this one is quite easy. Queen e6. And then there's another checkmate pattern, a bit similar to the one with the bishop and queen, I would say. And the last option we're going to look at here is knight to e2. But again, in this position, we have queen to e7 is given, but queen e6 is again the same kind of checkmate there that we've seen before. So, patterns of checkmate, this is a rather random position, but throughout this course, you're going to understand different patterns, how different pieces work together, how you should use different pieces in combination with each other. Some pieces work much better than other pieces, like a knight and a queen. We're even going to look how pawns combine. The author really does go into depth. This is the most in-depth attacking course I've ever done, as you can tell by the video hours. Oh, blimey, Guff. And it really is fascinating to see how some of these things link better in certain situations. So we'll have a look at those patterns again in more depth later on. Another key thing, and the final key thing we're just going to talk about in this chapter, all these things are go into much more depth later on, is mating squares and focal points. There's a whole chapter on focal points later on. Now, when you're getting to the execution stage of your attack, so this is when you've done the build up, you've brought your pieces to correct squares, and you're getting near the sort of end of the game, or even when you're building up, it can be there. You should work out which are the focal points in the position, the key, real heart, I would say, of the position that you want to use your pieces on to create that checkmate. Now, again, we have a rather confusing structure in front of us that is used as an example. And if you just look at this position, it confuses me. But then the more we look at it, we can think, which square do we want to land the killer blow on? That square is the so-called focal point. You could also call it the weak square, lots of names you could call it. But it's just understanding the killer square, I would say. And here, it's actually the D4 square. If we can somehow get our queen to that square, it will be checkmate. Other ideas are not really working, and we also look at the concept of useless checks. I mean, don't check your opponent's king if it's going to help him escape. You want to try to keep your opponent's king in a net, and often checks can just help your opponent run away. So to work that focal square, white first should play rook takes e2. And to understand the focal squares, you've got to understand what we looked at before, the patterns, how pieces work together, how they coordinate together, and how you're supposed to use these techniques to really trap your enemy king. And this is through communication of your pieces, but also looking at how your opponent's pieces work and stopping them working. For now, for example, this bishop is no longer controlling d4 because of the pin. So queen d4 is the main threat. And again, we'll look at different moves here. Maybe you can have a go already at solving the sort of slight puzzle position we have. If pawn takes rook, what two-move sequence brings the focal point into play and allows us to checkmate on that square? Well, we need to distract the bishop away, so f4, and after the bishop is distracted away, queen to d4, and we've got clear hold of that point now, delivering checkmate. Now, you may think some of these things are obvious, and we're starting off with some of these obvious thought processes because they are something we go into a lot more, but we've got to really have these underlying thoughts when we're playing in order to know what area of the board we move into and what our plan should be and how we develop the right plan. And if you do this, you should never be stuck for a middle game plan again, when you're attacking at least. So let's have a look at other options here. Well, if king to d5, the focal point has maybe changed now, but this is because conditions in chess are ever changing. One focal point it could start with, but it could develop into another one. Here, though, it's white to play in checkmate. f4, unleashing the bishop, checkmate. Other options are no better. If queen c1, we now that does nothing to stop our actual real idea. Queen d4 using the pin, checkmate. And well, anything else could be played. If f4 in this position, well, we change a little bit, but again, we start by using the focal point, and in this case, it ends up on a divot square being checkmate. So this whole idea of these focal points is very important, and I'm just going to read now from the text, so I try not to miss anything that is important. And the author gives 4 conditions, really, or 4 little tips. The attack of few instances, well, 4 mistakes, should I say. So tips, but things that can happen which are wrong ways of thinking. So few instances of mistakes concerning mating patterns. And knowing what we're doing wrong is just as important as knowing what we should be doing right, because we've got to get rid of the mistakes in our game. So one common mistake is the attacker fails to perceive that he can neither stop his opponent from moving his king nor driving him into a mating net, but still plays for checkmate. Such a course of action is naturally futile, and though it possibly produce perpetual check, it cannot produce checkmate. So when you're starting an attack, basically, you've got to make sure the conditions for the attack are there. You've got to make sure your pieces are ready, your opponent's weak. This is all based on calculation, but also on basic principles. Another mistake would be the attacker plays on the basis of typical mating patterns, overlooking the possibility of an atypical one in a particular continuation. So we will look at how you can look at unusual ideas and find them in combination with the normal ones. You've got to think outside the box. Chess is such a complex game. Things are going to be different in different situations, and you've got to be ready for that. Another mistake, the third of four, the player sees all the possible mating patterns based on one focal point, such as d4, but fails to realize that all this is cancelled out when the opponent's king moves and it runs away from that focal point. And this now creates new focal points and new patterns, again, ever-changing position. The fourth thing that is mentioned is the player decides on a course of action based on certain focal points without realizing that he cannot provide cover for it or even clear it of the influence of his opponent's pieces. Mistakes made in this selection of focal point will be found even in the games of masters. So you've got to get rid of those defenders. You've got to, make sure that you're not being too optimistic when you're attacking. Be realistic. The other thing I would like to add to the author's text there, which I find very useful, and a big mistake I find lower rated players when attacking, is underestimating their opponent's counter-attacking chances or even their opponent's options. Being too concentrated on your own ideas when attacking can lead to failure. You might miss a blow that your opponent has. You might miss a defensive escape route your opponent has. So do start thinking when attacking about all of your opponent's ideas and making sure you're not just concentrating on your sequence of moves, but also on your opponent's sequence of moves as well. And that will really help you excel in the area of becoming a great attacking player.